It could be the most consequential summit between the world's two superpowers in decades. Everything from trade and technology to the future of Taiwan and the Iran war are on the table as Donald Trump meets with Xi Jinping. I'm Hazem Seeker, and today's Newsmaker is the US-China summit in Beijing. It's the first of 4 potential summits planned for the year between the leaders of China and the US, and it comes at a pivotal time for both countries. Trade and competition for technology will be high on the agenda. The US may also be looking for China to use its leverage with Iran and help open up the Strait of Hormuz. But China could also exact a heavy price for its cooperation.
It is the first visit by an American president to China since Donald Trump's last visit 9 years ago, and China is putting on a show. The spectacle is symbolic as well as strategic. Careful choreography on a grand scale to impress the US president as well as to wow the world.
We're going to have a fantastic future together. Such respect for China, the job you've done. You're a great leader. I say it to everybody. You're a great leader. Sometimes people don't like me saying it, but I say it anyway because it's true. I only say the truth.
Donald Trump is visiting China at a time where the international political climate is very different to what it was nearly a decade ago, and China wants to project an image of stability, reliability, but also strength.
I have always believed that the shared interests between China and the United States outweigh our differences, that the success of each nation represents an opportunity for the other, and that a stable China-US relationship is a boon for the world.
On the agenda, tech, trade, Tehran, and Taiwan. CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world accompanied the US president on his trip. Trump is keen to strike big deals with the Chinese. But the US and China are also in a febrile tariff truce. Trump applied tariffs on many nations of the world, including massive tariffs on Chinese exports in the early days of his second term, and it quickly spiraled into a tariff war. But many of those measures had to be partially walked back or reduced. China placed strict export curbs on rare earth metals, high-tech magnets crucial to modern aircraft, semiconductors, and cars. China now, broadly speaking, faces lower US tariffs, at about the same rate as anywhere else. But Tehran is expected to loom over talks. China is dependent on oil from Iran, and the economy is suffering to some extent due to the shortages, even in spite of large stockpiles of oil. It is also an ally of Iran, and the US president is expected to ask for Chinese assistance in reopening the Strait of Hormuz to uninterrupted shipping. But Xi Jinping also wants to use the visit to hammer home China's unmoving stance opposing Taiwanese independence, with Chinese state media reporting that Xi Jinping raised the Taiwan question during the summit.
President Xi Jinping pointed out that the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-US relations. If it is handled properly, the bilateral relationship will enjoy overall stability. Otherwise, the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts, putting the entire relationship in great jeopardy.
Across the Taiwan Strait, the Taiwanese look at the US president's visit to Beijing with concern. Fears exist that China may ask for concessions on the US stance on Taiwan in exchange for Chinese assistance on Iran, and that the famously transactional US president may just oblige.
The Chinese side expects the United States to stop selling weapons to Taiwan. Then they should first review their own military threats toward Taiwan. Just this morning, we detected 3 Chinese military aircraft and 6 naval vessels operating around the Taiwan Strait.
Trump and Xi may have been all smiles during the public parades and handshakes, but the relationship between China, an emergent superpower, And the US, an established one, is still tense. And whatever is agreed or not agreed during this summit will affect the global political climate for years to come.
Well, joining me now to talk more about this from Washington, we have the founder of Sheridan Media Group and a former national spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, Kevin Sheridan. From Livingston, New Jersey, CEO of CJPA Global Advisors, Earl Carr, and from London, founder and president of the Center for China and Globalization, Huiyao Yang. Good to have you all with us. So, Kevin Sheridan, if I could start with you. Who holds the better cards at this summit at this point? Is it President Trump or is it Xi Jinping?
Well, they both have cards to play, and I don't know, I could put odds on it. I think 50-50 probably. There's a possibility that what comes out of this is a totally new relationship with the U.S. and China being part of a multipolar world that prioritizes sovereign nations over big global pacts. And, I don't know how much they'll get done here. I think the optics have been great. I think they both have said the right things. I think on trade, they will probably hammer out some new deals that will be helpful to both countries. Obviously, the Iran issue looms over everyone, and the Taiwan issue over that. So whether or not that can get resolved, in one meeting is unlikely, but I think they are having good discussions.
Huiyao Yang, there is a sense from many people outside of China that the U.S. is coming into this summit in a weaker position. Is that the general feeling inside China? How is China looking at this?
Well, I think that China is not view this as a stronger or weak position, but I think it's just high time that the two largest economy and also two strong leaders get together. I do think, though, that the second term of Trump is more pragmatic, more down to earth. And also after first term of Trump, second term of Biden for the last 8-9 years, the U.S. has tried many things like trade war, sanctions, and small fence, high yard, small fence, and things like that. And it's not really achieving much. And China has actually reached the capability of counter back at this stage now. So it's really more practical to stabilize the bilateral relations. So I'm very glad to hear both President Xi and President Trump agree. Now U.S. is going to usher in a new phase of constructive strategic stability.
Earl Carr, how do you see this summit? And is it also about genuinely resetting relations or just kind of managing things as they are and avoiding open confrontation?
This is fundamentally about having some guardrails around the relationship. It's important to understand it's been 9 years since President Trump last visited China. And so it is incredibly important for both leaders to be able to manage this relationship well. Each country has significant political and economic headwinds. For President Xi, you've got youth unemployment in China at around 20%. You've got rising inflationary costs. You've got large issues with corporate debt, the real estate industries. So I think, President Xi wants to be able to, number one, secure this notion of parity with the United States, but also secure important economic concessions and manage the relationship well. For President Trump, you've got rising inflationary costs in the United States. You've got midterm elections coming up. You've got the issues of the Strait of Hormuz looming in the background, which many Americans have been very open that he has not, and his administration has not handled this well. So I think both leaders go into the meeting trying to put some clear and inherent guardrails. They want to have more predictability within the relationship, and they want to have some more tangible outcomes. One issue about tariffs, President Trump during his first term advocated that he was going to be strong against China and that he was going to make reducing the deficit a quintessential focus in his 4 years of office. After 4 years, the deficit did not decrease between the United States and China. The deficit actually widened. So it's going to be interesting to see what are the true tangible outcomes of this strategic, constructive relationship.
Kevin Sheridan, if we talk about Iran, Trump appears to want Chinese help in terms of the leverage that it has with Iran, although he has denied that publicly. He may ask for them to stop purchasing Iranian oil and cut any military assistance to Iran, things like that. Why would China, first of all, help the U.S. on that? And what major, surely they would demand major concessions in return.
Yeah, I think that's going on behind the scenes. You heard Trump say, he doesn't need their help. Obviously, one of the major powers in the world, and somebody who, the country that buys a ton of oil from Iran is going to be a factor in this. But this is hurting their economy too. So, it's in their own self-interest. They have, we have cards to play as the U.S. with China on this. I think. He may give some concessions to them for some help. But look, if Iran thinks they're going to wait out the United States because of the midterm elections, some structural changes have happened in redistricting here domestically that I won't go into. But Republicans, the president's party may keep the House and Senate and may offer him the opportunity to just keep going on with this blockade. And that's going to hurt China very badly. It's going to crush Iran's economy completely. So if they're just playing a waited out game because they think that they can just get to the summer, that may be a strategic miscalculation at this point because Republicans may stay in charge.
Henry Huiyao, what would China expect in return for any concessions that it might give to the U.S. on Iran?
Well, I think this is already a stage that I think the whole world is already can't bear the consequences. I mean, China actually doing fine in terms of energy. Even though China is the largest trading partner with all Gulf states and buys 90% of Iranian petroleum, but China, 50-60% of China energy now is renewable. And also, China has a large reserve of petroleum and energy. And also, China can also buy cheap gas from Russia or Central Asia or elsewhere. So I think China is the least heated of this crisis. But like Japan buys 90% from Middle East and South Korea, ASEAN, many other countries. Well, I mean, Europe is energy so badly hurt as well. So what I think is it's really interesting because Congress has limited Trump to continue to fight there. And then Iranian doesn't want to fight either. I mean, Iranian foreign minister was in Beijing, and Chinese foreign minister Wang, he told him, this war should not continue, and Hormuz Strait should be open, and you should seek a dialogue. So strong message China is giving already, I think. But I do think there's a more economic and political influence China can continue to exercise. But that is really up to both U.S. and Iran. They all exhausted. They all want to get out. And here's a convenient ladder that can gracefully coming down with China's help, like China did for Saudi and Iranian a few years ago. So I think certainly, China can help U.S. for a larger peace in the Middle East, in Ukraine, elsewhere. I'm sure U.S. can help China on its cross-strait Taiwan mainland peace as well. Why not President Trump say support the peaceful unification of China? So I really think there's a lot of common benefit for the both leaders to meet and exchange their ideas, and then there will come some consensus. I think after those summits.
Earl Carr, how do you view the calculations for both countries on Iran?
On Iran, I think that Trump has made it very clear that, and as President Xi stated as well, they both want the Strait of Hormuz open. Uh, China has a number of oil, specifically from Qatar, oil imports, and so it is hurting economically. Iran is one of its primary economic partners with respect to oil. So I think that there is a lot of concern that the longer that the Strait of Hormuz remains closed, there are negative externalities impacting both China and the United States. I think geopolitically, I think that there are some issues there. There have been at least anecdotal as well as analysts noting that China has supplied some communications, satellite communications information to Iran. They are strategic allies, and so how that factors into an ongoing kind of dialogue, I think, is important. I think another calculation is that when we think midterm elections, I think Iran, I would slightly push back on Kevin's notion that time is on our side. I don't think time, and Iran knows that. The longer that they can wait this out, even with the gerrymandering redistricting, I think Americans seeing the inflationary costs at the pump with $5 gas in my state, in New Jersey alone, the longer, and we know that gas prices are not going to be coming down anytime soon. I think as midterm elections come, I think that this will have a negative impact on Trump with respect to midterm elections. And I think Iran and the United States, they see collaboration, and they both have a strategic interest in keeping the Strait of Hormuz open and bringing costs down for both economies.
I want to turn then to some of the larger economic issues that we touched on earlier. Kevin Sheridan, we know President Trump has brought a number of CEOs, American CEOs, with him on this trip, in particular some tech CEOs. When we look at the issues of trade and tariffs and technology advancement, what is at stake for China and the U.S. here?
Well, it's pretty astonishing. He brought the entire U.S. economy on one plane, practically trillions of dollars of market cap. Look, I think he obviously wants to do deals on like soybeans and commodities and stuff, but ultimately I think he wants to open the markets more. China's obviously an exporter nation. He wants to be able to have our companies sell to them. And, those are great American companies. Those are great products that they sell. And I think he just wants better deals on how we can get into their markets and not be constantly just buying from China, and we actually can sell to China. So let's see if any progress is made there. But he's got some really serious heavyweights on that trip, and I think they can make their case pretty well.
Henry Huiyao Yang, what do you see is at stake for China in all of this?
Well, I really think that, this shows how important that business community and those top leaders of the largest companies attached to China, Apple, Elon Musk, and all, Jason Huang, all those big tech giants as well. So it's, all those experiences in the last almost 9 years since the first term of Trump shows that, we cannot decouple. I was just recently in the U.S. as well. I never heard too much of decoupling. Is still the talk there now. So we probably, after all those 9 years, we realized that we are really indispensable. We achieved mutually assured disruption probably, and now we have to assure mutually construction from MAD to MAC. So I think that's what the pragmatic approach Trump has taken. And then Trump was saying at the Great Hall of People, he's only taking the number one of those companies. Now, there's a lot of number two or some, other VPs that wants to come, he cannot take, and there's only so much limited space. So I think, business community shows that China is still the largest, probably one of the largest market, and also there's an enormous cooperation that U.S.-China can achieve. According to AmCham survey, 70-80% of U.S. companies still want to do business there, and most of them still profitable. I doubt, we already achieved a kind of a mutually dependent status. It's just we have to find a way to work together. So I'm glad to see that they're proposing to have an investment board and a trade board so that they can establish a regular mechanism and talk and exchange and find ways to sort it out. And that would be great. So I'm sure there's three summits coming up. We accelerate business collaboration between China and the U.S.
Earl Carr, now you mentioned earlier about the need for maintaining the guardrails between these two superpowers and managing this relationship. So when we look at these issues of trade and tech advancement and so on, what areas do you see for potential wins here in terms of agreements being signed?
That's a great question, and I think this fundamentally 17 of the largest U.S. companies are traveling with Trump to China. I think some of the quintessential issues are not just technology. It was interesting that Jensen Huang was not included on the initial flight, but then was able to kind of Trump called him in the air, and then he was able to find a flight on Alaska and then get to Beijing, which demonstrates in many ways that the growing recognition is that NVIDIA's most advanced chips remain blocked from the Chinese markets, and U.S. export controls. And NVIDIA has done a great job. Jensen Huang has done a great job of trying to advocate in the United States for the need to sell higher end chips to the U.S. market, advocating this will be good for the U.S. economy, good for U.S. Jobs. But he has faced a lot of backlash on national security issues. So I think that will be an increasingly important topic that will be discussed at the meeting. China has agreed to purchase more oil from the United States. However, we've seen this playbook before. China made guarantees on purchasing more oil from the United States before that were never adhered to. So the proof is in the pudding. What are the actual strategic outcomes coming? I think the fact that Jensen Huang was included in these talks is a recognition that signals kind of chip access, and export controls will be a central negotiating point on this trip. This trip is about what I call the three Bs: beans, beef, and Boeing. Boeing wants to be able to secure more contracts. The U.S. farmers want to export more beefs, but what we have seen in the past is that U.S. farmers are being subsidized. Here, U.S. soybean is not being exported to China. In fact, Brazil has actually exported a lot more soybeans to make up for those markets. So these are, I think, critical trade issues that need to be discussed, and the proof will be what tangible, real concessions can be made. I agree with Henry. The U.S.-China economic relationship is by far one of the most important bilateral relationships in the world, and discussions on these issues are critical.
Kevin Sheridan, just briefly, what does a successful summit look like to you?
Yeah, I think successful summit looks like some tangible trade negotiations that increase our commodities to China, open up some of our companies to be able to sell more to China. Proof will be in the pudding, like a previous guest just said, whether or not they follow through on it. And that the optics have been very, very good. I mean, they both look great. The warm welcome for him was good. But I think you'll see a bullet list of achievements that they'll put out after this, and then we can all judge whether or not it was ultimately successful.
Henry Wang, what would you point to as success then when this summit is completed?
Well, I think it's a great success. Basically, just by purely President Trump landed in Beijing in the beautiful May season. Flowers blossom everywhere. He's welcomed everywhere, and then the buildings are illuminated in the evenings, welcoming. I think just the handshaking and toast of all those. Those big pictures sending around the world. That shows that the two largest country in the world are not destined for war. As my friend Graham Allison mentioned, they can avoid Houthis' trap, and then they can find a way to coexist peacefully. Particularly the success of both sides agree to be a constructive strategic stability, where we remember the first term of Trump, they talk about strategic rivalry, and now this term we talk about strategic stability. That's a huge achievement for both countries.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. It'll be interesting to see what does come out of this summit and what kind of success comes out of it once it's completed. But I want to thank all three of our guests for being with us. Kevin Sheridan in Washington, Earl Carr in New Jersey, and Henry Huiyao from London. Thanks very much for being on the Newsmakers. And thank you, as always, for watching. You can follow us on social media and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Hazem Sika. We'll see you next time.